It began with a glimmer, a flash of sunlight on wet rock buried in the silt of an unknown river. January 24th, 1848. A carpenter named James Marshall knelt by the waters of the American River and lifted a fragment of destiny between his fingers. What he held wasn't just metal. It was a mirror of greed, hope, and transformation. Within months, the quiet hills of California would erupt into chaos and dreams. Ships would abandon their anchors, cities would rise from dust, and empires would pivot toward the Pacific. This is the story of how a single discovery redefined the fate of a continent. In the winter of 1848, California was a distant, half-forgotten edge of the world. A remote Mexican province only recently ceded to the United States. Its valleys and mountains stretched wild and untamed, populated by native tribes, rancheros, and scattered settlers chasing uncertain futures. Roads were few. Towns were little more than trading posts surrounded by endless plains and forests. The Pacific coast, far from the centers of power in Washington or New York, felt like the end of the earth. At Sutter's Mill, near the small outpost of Coloma, James W. Marshall was overseeing the construction of a sawmill for his employer, Johann Sutter, a Swiss immigrant dreaming of building an agricultural empire in the Sacramento Valley. On that cold January morning, as the water channel cleared, Marshall noticed something shining in the mud. "It made my heart thump," he later recalled. He bit the fragment, tested its weight, and whispered the word that would ignite the world: gold. At first, Sutter tried to keep the discovery secret. He feared that his lands and his dreams would be overrun, but secrets rarely survive the wind. By the spring of 1848, word had traveled along trade routes, spreading from campfires to harbors, from whispers to headlines. When President James K. Polk confirmed the discovery in December, the world erupted. Ships began to fill the harbors of San Francisco, then little more than a sleepy settlement of a few hundred souls. By 1849, it had exploded into a booming port city teeming with thousands. They came from everywhere: New York bankers, Chilean miners, Chinese laborers, French adventurers, and farmers from as far as Australia. Each carried the same feverish dream: to find gold, to find freedom, to start anew. The gold rush was not merely an event, it was an awakening. Imagine the sound of hammers striking rock, the roar of rivers churned by thousands of hands, the air thick with dust and ambition. Every sunrise brought new faces, and every sunset carried the echo of broken dreams. By the end of 1849, more than 80,000 people had poured into California, by land and by sea. They called themselves the 49ers. Some walked thousands of miles across deserts and mountains, facing starvation and disease. Others endured months at sea, rounding Cape Horn or crossing the deadly jungles of Panama. Death, hunger, and madness followed in their wake. But nothing could extinguish the fever. San Francisco became the epicenter, a city of tents and planks where fortunes were made and lost overnight. Merchants like Levi Strauss sold denim to miners, unknowingly creating the fabric of American identity. Entrepreneurs built banks, saloons, and newspapers. The city pulsed with an energy that felt both lawless and divine. Gold dust replaced coinage. Hope became the only true currency. The rivers glittered with men knee-deep in mud, washing pans of gravel, praying for a flash of fortune. The lucky ones found nuggets as big as walnuts. The rest found ruin. And yet the myth grew. Letters home described rivers paved with gold, hills overflowing with riches. For millions across the world, California became a symbol, the place where destiny could be rewritten. But the price of that dream was steep. Indigenous peoples, who had lived along these rivers for millennia, were displaced, enslaved, or massacred. The environmental toll was devastating: forests stripped, rivers diverted, hills scarred. What began as a search for wealth became a conquest of nature itself. Still, the momentum was unstoppable. In 1850, California was admitted as the 31st state of the Union, barely 2 years after the discovery. Immigrants from Asia, Latin America, and Europe brought languages, traditions, and conflict. Chinatown emerged in San Francisco, a testament to both opportunity and exclusion. New laws, like the foreign miners' tax, targeted non-white laborers, while vigilante justice ruled the hills. The gold rush revealed the best and worst of the human spirit: innovation and greed, courage and cruelty, creation and destruction intertwined. And through it all, the land changed. California's mountains were carved open, its valleys flooded with ambition. A frontier was transformed into an empire. By the 1860s, the gold had begun to dwindle. Many miners left empty-handed, their dreams buried beneath the dust. But others stayed, building farms, towns, and families. The fleeting rush had planted something permanent: infrastructure, commerce, and a culture of relentless reinvention. The same energy that drove men into the hills would soon drive trains across the continent, build telegraph lines, and light the spark of Silicon Valley a century later. The gold rush was the first tremor of a technological and economic revolution that would define the modern world. Standing on the banks of the American River today, the water runs clear once more. The hills are quiet, the ghosts of miners long gone. Yet beneath the surface the echoes remain, the whispers of pickaxes, the laughter, the despair, the promise. California's destiny was written not in ink, but in dust and gold. The rush lasted only a few short years, but its consequences shaped centuries. It shifted migration patterns, transformed global trade, and forged the myth of the American dream that anyone, from anywhere, could start again. But that dream came with shadows. For every fortune there was a grave. For every city built, a culture erased. The story of California's gold is also a story of loss, of what was sacrificed in the name of progress. Yet out of that chaos rose something enduring, a belief in possibility, in reinvention, in chasing horizons even when they burn. The gold rush did not simply change California. It changed humanity's sense of distance, ambition, and belonging. It made the Pacific a gateway instead of a boundary. It connected continents, collapsed isolation, and sparked an era of movement that would define the modern age. And perhaps that is the truest legacy of 1848. Not the metal pulled from the earth, but the unyielding pursuit of transformation. Gold was the catalyst, but it was never the prize. The real treasure was the dream itself. As the sun sets over the Sierra Nevada, the river still glimmers with traces of history. The same light that once caught James Marshall's eye continues to dance upon the water, a silent reminder that sometimes a single moment can change the course of the world.